Hi guys, welcome to the MagicGatheringStrat channel. I'm Pierakor and I'm bringing you another review kind of video. This time I'm joined by najay1, who you might know because he's recently, I think, uh, been added to the extended family of MagicGatheringStrat. If you care about Pauper at all, you should really know his name. He is a great resource, both at our website and on the Pauper Reddit, about the Pauper Meta game breakdown. One of three people really responsible for the great um, Pauper Meta game breakdown we see every single week. And now he's agreed to join me here, be part of my video, and it's especially great because this match you're gonna see is actually a match I played against him. So, welcome, Naya.
Hi, thanks for the great introduction, Pierakor. So I'm najay1. I do some stuff for MagicGatheringStrat, and really just love the Power community. So let's get this started.
And I just remembered that I forgot something. Well, we don't have to start over for this. It will just take a minute because obviously you need to see my screen, so I have to share that.
Okay, that'd be good.
Yeah, so you can see. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, I can see it.
That's good. Okay, so we will start out with the deck list, having a short look, and we started with my own deck list just because it was more convenient for me. So maybe your take on this deck for a minute. What do you think about this deck? Do you think this deck is at all playable in the current meta, and what are just your random thoughts on this deck?
Well, I actually really like the BantFog and also the simic fog deck that have kind of been floating around for a while. It seems like they never get a lot of traction. I think in a lot of ways because I don't think a lot of people like to play with or against the deck. But I do think, especially in the right metagame, the deck can be very, very powerful.
Yeah, well, obviously, if it's a creature-based metagame, a deck dominated by decks like White Tokens or Stompy, like it was not so long ago, just when Delver was very popular, it was pushed away by Stompy and White Tokens naturally because these decks are very good against Delver. And then for a time, it was a very good deck.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. So, looks like in the upcoming meta, as Burn starts to drift away a little bit, I'd expect to see this deck to pick back up even a little more.
I disagree, but we can talk about that a little bit later. I think, is there any card choices here, or any deck building choices that you object to, something you would like to comment on?
Um, well, I think it's interesting. How much do you like the quest to dismember the one green enchantment that you throw on the Jason's Erasure? What exactly are you having that in the deck list for as a one of?
Well, first of all, it's just a one-off, so it's a silver bullet type of thing, but we have four ways to transmit into it. So it's one of the things you really have to keep in mind before you think about what does this card do is you're only gonna really have this when you need it. You're very rarely gonna draw into this or have this in your starting hand. However, when you need it, you can muddle for it. And to what it does, it completely wrecks burn and any other thing which kind of has a main board surprise for us. So oftentimes we lose against, well, not oftentimes, but it's quite uh, likely to that you lose against a deck where you really should be winning just because they have one card which can do some damage. Like against Stompy. Some Stompy lists, sometimes called the mono green burn lists, play Viridian Longbow main. And this card absolutely is the only way, well, it's not the only way, but it's a really good way to counter that. So your opponent is Stompy, he attacked you down to 8 life, he plays Viridian Longbow, and your eyes open wide. You are scared because he can do like 10 damage in a single turn. So you can get Quietus Repair, and then you can either put the Quietus Repair on the Longbow and gain life, or you can put it on the Longbow and destroy it. So doubles as life gain and as destruction of artifacts. It's very, very good game 1 against burn. Usually your game 1 plan is against burn is counter a few things, use right crawl and down charm on a few things the first 2-3 turns, and then you immediately muddle into Quietus Repair. And if you played Quietus Repair and then you survive like a turn or two, you just win because they cannot raise Quietus Repair. and it has some value against decks which are creature based but play very heavily Galvanic Blast or Lightning Bolt. Because against these decks, if you do draw it, usually it's not good enough to muddle into it, but if you do draw it, you can put it on a Jace, and while you keep fogging for the creatures, you usually stop to care about the Lightning Bolts and the Galvanic Blast, because Quite Repair, again, is just gonna outrace them. And some points, especially against decks which are maybe only have 3 or 4 creatures on the board, after a couple turns, it will have worked as kind of an additional fog. So there's several elements to this in different matchups, and the whole thing started kind of when I realized that I really hated that the first game against Burn wasn't as easy as I thought it should be, and I wanted to have some mainboard life gain which wouldn't disrupt the core of the deck, and I started out with Pristine Talisman because I thought I'm just gonna add 2 Pristine Talisman, cut 1 land. And in the matchups where I don't care about life gain, Pristine Talisman is going to be ramp, which is good because we need the mana. And in the matchups we care about life gain, Pristine Talisman is going to win us the game. And I've since changed to Quite Repair because it's only a single slot and it's more versatile and we can transmit into it.
All right, cool. That makes sense. I think it's definitely an interesting choice that I haven't seen in too many lists right now. Um, and I think it's really definitely an interesting choice. So really insightful comments on that.
Yeah. Well, it's indefinitely more important than the blue-green version because the blue-green version is really a lot weaker to burn, and I think the addition of this card in the blue-green version is what really made that deck made that matchup from unfavorable to favorable. Anyway, anything else you might like to comment on before we move on to your list?
No, I think that's good. I mean, unless you have anything else to talk about, I do think it's an interesting list, and you're definitely one of the experts on it, especially in the meta or in the current community.
Well, I always like to talk about the draw spells. There's a lot of different draw spells. Some people play draw spells which I would never play, which I find very objectable, and I'm never happy with my own assortment of draw spells, especially something like Keep Watch seems very iffy. I would like to have a real instant 3-mana draw spell. I've often said this, I want something like Thirst for Knowledge, something which is draw free and then somehow discard something. But obviously if we had Thirst for Knowledge or Compulsive Research on instant, it would be probably insane in the format, so...
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's all I have on this list. So I definitely think it's a good list and one definitely to look out for.
Okay, I think I've talked about this list so many times before that I don't really want to go over it here. Um, just one thing which might stand out to you in the sideboard, I don't know, is the Hydroblast.
Yeah, I think the four of Hydroblast, it's certainly an interesting choice in this deck, but I know that especially as I've played against this deck, it's often been you can get the deck down to 3 or 2, and if you're able to top deck that one Lightning Bolt, that one Galvanic Blast, that one Burn spell, it can oftentimes be enough. And it's also just useful in so many situations against red decks. So I think it could be a pretty useful card in this matchup. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on it?
Hmm. Well, I didn't really get to play it. I just made this change for you. So this
Okay.
this deck list is called Fog Naya, and this was this was a suggestion made by Obson when I asked him for advice against you. He said he will most likely play Goblins, Burn, or Cordova Boros, and I would just slam 4 Hyroblasts in the sideboard for the eventual um, Pyroblast or Flaring Pain. And I thought about this quite hard, and I argued with him that I think Hydroblast is a bad sideboard card, and that I wouldn't bring it in against Burn. Probably don't want to bring it in against both the other decks. And um, I figured out that I had open slots. Like I cut like 2 Last Breath because I was very sure you wouldn't be on Familiars. And I don't remember what the other thing I cut was, but I just slammed them in case something happened, but I didn't end up boarding them because I thought, well, these can be really lackluster if you're not on a very, very aggressive Flaring Pain plan. And if I lose game 2 to a very aggressive Flaring Pain plan or very aggressive Pyroblast plan, which would in turn, though, disrupt your own core of the deck. You would be playing less creatures, less value. Then I could justify boarding in 4 Hydroblasts game 3. But I didn't want to predict anything special game 2 just because I wasn't sure just how much metagaming you had done against me. And but yeah, I prepared for this matchup because I was really scared, and I did bring 4 Hydroblasts, which I did not end up using.
All right, it's interesting. So, I mean, I think Hydro Blast would be good against the deck, but I mean, I haven't played with the Fog list basically at all. So I don't know how useful they are, but based on your opinions, it doesn't seem to be the best choice unless we're going on some BorosKitty super aggro plan here.
Yeah, yeah, I never would have played this in like a metagame I don't know or something. Okay, so let's
Okay.
have a look at.
Yeah, so this is a BorosKitty list mainly based on what Dromar X has been playing or had been playing in the dailies. I picked up this list not too long ago, so I don't have the best insights into the list, but I do think it's an interesting one. So I mean, going down the list, you have your value creatures in Glinthawk and Core Skyfisher. Those provide the engine of the deck and also do the majority of the damage in a game. With that, you've got your 10 main artifacts, the Ichor Wellspring, Prophetic Prism, Origin Spellbomb. All of those are really made to go through your deck really quickly. You play those down, you're able to bounce them back with Core Skyfisher, Glinthawk, and that's really the main engine of the deck. Past that, you have just an onslaught of burn spells in Galvanic Blast and Lightning Bolt that give you a lot of closure and also help provide a lot of the control grindiness that this deck lives on. Past that, some of the main cards, you got 4 Journey to Nowhere and 1 Oblivion Ring, which play similar roles. Just there to keep playing that control role and get troublesome creatures off the board. Past that, we got Core Sanctifiers. This is more of an interesting choice. Part of this was a little bit of metagaming against the Jason's Erasure that your deck is so popular on. And, you know, it's really just a strong spell against a lot of different decks, and also being able to bounce it with Core Skyfisher and then replay the Sanctifiers to continue destroying enchantments is a really powerful effect. And then lastly, we got Beetleback Chief. This is a card I've kind of been debating about. Not sure how powerful it is. It's actually an addition I made just a few hours before we actually played, and I may end up taking it out. So I think it's an interesting card. It certainly provides a lot of power and, you know, helps continually spread out and go wide along with your Four Cthulhu Rebirth that you have. But as a curve topper, it's not the best there, but it does provide some power. And lastly, one of the card that this deck is often named on, Cthulhu Rebirth. This is potentially one of the most powerful things that I can do in creating 3/1/1s just off the back, and oftentimes you're going to want to be sacrificing those Ichor Wellspring, which is then it's a 1 mana, get 3/1/1 goblins and draw a card, and that's really powerful. So this deck is mainly just made to grind out the opponent and get slow incremental advantages and eventually win.
Yeah, when I first saw this deck, I didn't know what it was called, and I called it Boros Synergy or Boros Value, because the whole synergy between the Ichor Wellspring and the Cthulhu Rebirth and the Glinthawk and the Core Skyfisher is really something. I mean, it doesn't always work that well. Sometimes this is just, you know, a beat deck, just plays creatures and attacks you and burn. But sometimes it's really beautiful. Sometimes they play like Wellspring turn 2, Glinthawk replay Wellspring, and then Cthulhu Rebirth, and it's really fun to see the whole value train go on there. It's definitely, I would say, usually slower than like a straight down beatdown deck, like Stompy maybe, or whatever other beatdown deck you might have in mind. But it has that value engine. It will keep drawing cards, which is very rare for a beatdown deck. And also, what makes it really tough to deal with is you could very easily draw into like 2 Galvanic Blast and a Lightning Bolt, and if you have Metalcraft, that's 11 damage.
Yeah, those burn spells there, they provide so much reach, especially in the end game, that it feels like you steal a lot of games just based on having so many burn spells and be able to fire them right off the bat. And it's something that I think a lot of people don't play around close to as much as they should And just against this deck, you got to preserve your life total very heavily because once you start getting in that 10 and under range, there's always a chance that they could just snap off a few burn spells in a row and it could end the game.
Yeah, yeah, I've definitely died to that, thinking, oh, I'm at 12 life, I'm gonna be okay, and then triple Galvanic Blast did me in. Um, but yeah, it's a great list. I really like this list. It's not that popular, I believe. Um, I can't really talk much about the card choices because I don't really never played the deck, don't really know any better. But the Beetle Black Chief is something that seems uh like it's the most objectable maybe, or the most questionable. And the Sanctifier's main, I don't know how good that is. It's definitely a value creature. Is it just enchantments or is it enchantments and artifacts?
It's enchantments and artifacts, so it is able to play a
Yeah,
really
okay.
valuable role.
I could definitely see it because suddenly it starts to hit it just a lot more. It starts to hit Affinity, it starts to hit Bone Splitter against so many decks, Viridian Longbow, even something like Life Stuff, which probably comes in for some decks against you. Um, yeah, I could see Sanctifier's main. It's okay, especially again because you have so much synergy there with Sky for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a card that I think has a lot more value, especially in this deck, which has it seems to have as much time as you want it to have. Being able to snap back the Sanctifiers and recast it, or just a lot of times get a 2-for-1 for face value, has been really, really valuable. So to go into the sideboard a little bit, we've got Dust to Dust as an artifact kill spell. I don't actually know if it's the best artifact destruction spell simply because in a lot of cases you'd want to destroy the artifact and not simply exile it with for that value with Ichor Wellspring and Origin Spellbomb. But right now, just depending on how valuable Affinity is, that's really one of your better cards against it. Patrician Scorn is just one of the better enchantment kill spells in general, being able to wipe off multiple enchantments, and also with the amount of white spells in your deck, being able to cast that for free is fantastic. We've got a few Flame Slash, which are able to continue playing that control role and take out a lot of the bigger 4/4 creatures in the metagame right now. Got your Pyroblast. I would actually probably want to load up on 3 to 4 Pyroblasts ideally, but I don't own the third Pyroblast. And if so, I think that'd be a great card to add to the sideboard. And then you got Electrickery for those 1/1 Goblin stack, Stompy, etc. And you got your Circle Protection Red. That's mainly there for just the amount of burn in the metagame right now. Burn has been really heavily popular, and it's something you definitely need a sideboard against. Unless we get an Obsidian Acolyte that just protects against mono black control, even though that's a really good matchup for this deck with the amount of burn you have, and also just because you have so many 1/1s with the Cathalta Rebirth and the Beetleback Chief, it makes a lot of their sacrifice effects just significantly worse. So that's basically in the sideboard. Any questions you have about this deck?
Well, about the sideboard, you said Dust to Dust. You don't like, but it does the exiling. I think the exiling is very good. I mean, first of all, Dust to Dust always a 2-for-1. I mean, if he has two artifacts, it's a 2-for-1. But I mean, if he has something like, sure, Disciple of Vault is not really played anymore, but he could have something like Disciple of Vault. He could have something like Wellspring, and I would say Wellspring is when it enters the graveyard, not when it leaves the battlefield. So, but I'm not sure on the rule text there. But I think Exile is usually better than Destroy.
I agree. I mean, I think Dust to Dust is still probably the best artifact destruction spell for this deck. But being able to destroy artifacts is certainly something of value in this deck specifically. So I've been looking around, but I don't actually know if there's a better artifact kill spell for this deck, but I'm certainly on the lookout for it.
I mean, it looks very, very powerful. If I was playing my modern deck, Mono Blutron, and my opponent would play this, I would absolutely be annoyed. But actually, this might be Modern League. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, the sideboard looks very solid, I have to say. I think the Patrician Scorn is probably the best against enchantments. Question is, do you really need it, or is this just something you want to play against me? Because you have the Sanctifiers. I suppose one of Patrician Scorn is very good against Hexproof though, but Hexproof has not really been a thing. So, and
Yeah,
it's kind of a numbo, I think. with Journey. I don't know if Patrician Scorn also destroys your own enchantments.
Um, I believe it does, but the thing is with the Journey to Nowhere, in a lot of cases, the Patrician cards are coming in.
Yeah.
Uh, it's in cases like, the Turbo Fog decks. It's in the blue-black control decks. And in a lot of those cases, the Journey to Nowheres are going in the sideboard anyways. And so with that, I think it's a decent spell, but again, it may not be the best spell for that spot, but it's definitely something that against your deck, the Patrician Scorn is much better than most other enchantment kill spells.
That's true. That's true. Well, I would say Ray of Revelation is the best, but you can't play that. Because Ray of Revelation will oftentimes get milled, and therefore you get card advantage out of milling. And if you draw it, you can just usually fire it off twice in the same turn, which means you can overload my conjures. But yeah, Ray of Revelation is just not in your manas. So, what are your thoughts on the matchup for you?
I think it's definitely a winnable matchup, but it's something that I don't know if the deck is necessarily favorable towards because against the Turbo Fog deck, one of the key things is being able to have a very aggressive start. And with this deck, there's a significant amount of tap lands. The deck is relatively slow in just that a lot of these creatures, they require you to bounce something back to your hand, and they have, a decent bit of setup cost. So it's relatively difficult to get that really quick start. But if you're able to get just a little bit of damage in, and you're lucky enough to draw a few burn spells in a row, it can be easy to steal a match like that.
Yeah, I think your game plan has to be very very fast. That certainly helps. Sometimes you will be able to be too fast, but that's, I think, very rare. You have to have a very very fast draw. But sometimes the Fog player is gonna be a little bit mana screw, maybe Fog screw, maybe he doesn't have a green, but he has a Moment's Peace stranded in his hand, and then maybe you can race him, be faster than he can Fog. But I think the real way you want to play is have an early threat, get the Fog player down to maybe 10 life, and then overload him with burn spells, which you drew off of your value engine. So my perspective is kind of that I have a lot of respect for the deck because I know it can be very fast, and I know it has the reach through Galvanic Blast and Lightning Bolt in the late game. I haven't played against this deck like in a real long time. I haven't played against it at all. I don't think it's been very popular lately, and when I did play against it, I often died, despite feeling that I should have been in control of the game, just because I tapped out for a draw spell and then suddenly 3 Galvanic Blasts to the dome. And the most important thing here is, I'm pretty sure that just looking at the main board, I'm probably the favorite, and I will probably win like 60-40 or something. But the sideboard, I think, for red, it's very easy to hate out our deck. So I guess one question is, why are you not playing Flaring Pain in the sideboard?
Well, I didn't change my deck too much for this matchup. I didn't want to get too deep into it, and right now, I'm not a huge fan of Flaring Pain. I do think that if there was a time to play it, it'd probably be right now with the amount of Circle of Protection red that's in the metagame, just because of burn. Um, but at that same point, Circle of Protection red isn't actually that bad against this deck because the way it often wins is by having just a lot of flyers and taking control, and all of those burn spells can go to just destroy creatures. So I don't think it's a necessity in those decks, and I think there's just better options. But against your deck, it certainly is a really strong choice.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that's enough about the deck, so I think we'll get into it. Um, so we played this was the quarterfinals by way of the Pauper League, Community League we're currently playing, and I was 4-0 in the Swiss, and you must have been 3-1.
Yeah, I was 3-1. I ended up losing the first match.
Did you play this deck the whole time?
No, I played Goblins for the first 2 matches, and then I think I played BorosKitty for the last 2. So I switched about halfway through.
Yeah. So I win the die roll here. I choose to play, obviously, and let's have a look at the starting hands. So first of all, my own starting hand, I'm very happy with what we have here. 2 mana, maybe could be 1 more mana, but we have 3 draw spells, 2 fogs. That's right where we want to be. I mean, we don't know yet what you're playing, obviously, but whatever it is, if it's burn, well, against burn this hand is pretty shitty, I have to say. But against goblins, we have access to a turn 2 fog if we really have to, but probably won't have to turn 2 fog when we ever play. And we have draw spells to draw into more lands, and more fogs, and other things like counters and jays and stuff like that. So I think this hand is quite potent. Definitely the potential here to get mana screwed and just lose outright, which is always usually the case. And what I'm looking for to do in the first few turns here is just find my land drops, see what my opponent is playing, and since I'm expecting you to be red, try to stay at high life totals. So, what's your opinion on your hand?
My hand, I think I probably should have mulliganed this one away in retrospect. I mean, you have 2 enter the battlefield tap lands, both that gain life, which isn't going to be useful in this matchup really at all. And additionally with that, you're not getting a fast start at all. Basically, best case scenario is you draw an untapped land or some sort of artifact and are able to either Cthulhu Rebirth or Core Skyfisher on turn 2, and you have to draw into an untapped land, and if you want to do the Cthulhu Rebirth, you also have to draw into some artifact. And with that, it's not great. It also has the Journey, which is basically useless against your deck. But I ended up keeping it because 2 Galvanic Blasts, especially against your deck, is fantastic. Being able to start with 2 pieces of burn and potentially drawing into 1, 2 more is often just going to be enough. With that, it's also got Metalcraft, and right now I have 0 artifacts in my hand, and if I want to use Cthulhu Rebirth, I'm going to have to sacrifice an artifact, so that puts me down, so that means I have to draw 4 artifacts. But based on how long these games tend to go, I was hoping that you were going to miss some of that life gain, and I was going to be able to sneak in for that last bit of damage. But at that same point, definitely not a great starting hand.
Yeah, if I have a look at that hand, what I see is we have 1 blank in Journey. Both Galvanic Blasts are probably not going to hit Metalcraft any soon, so you might count 1 Galvanic Blast as dead. That's 2 dead cards already. And then there's also the issue with Cthulhu Rebirth is going to take care of another artifact, so we probably have about 2.5 dead cards in hand. So usually when you have 1 dead card in hand, it's an okay choice to mulligan unless the other cards are really good. And the other cards are not that good, so I think a mulligan would have been maybe the right choice here, but again, I haven't played this deck, so it's tough to say.
Yeah, I definitely think a mulligan would have been the right choice in this situation, so I think that was a misplay. Alright, yeah, so I think that's enough about the starting hands. Let's get into the game.
Yeah, so it seems like you are considering actually the mulligan here for a few seconds.
Yeah, so this was one definitely a debate for me. And I think one that in most matchups would be a lot closer to keepable. I mean, it plays the control role really well, but in this matchup, it's certainly not a great hand.
Well, you draw an Origin Spellbomb. So yeah, there's an artifact that's really good.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the better cards I was hoping for here with Cthulhu Rebirth. Hopefully if I can draw an untapped land, being able to cast that would be nice.
So I draw Accumulate Knowledge, which I'm really happy to see, because this means that I can draw cards without giving you extra cards.
Yeah, so definitely a strong draw there, and then I ended up drawing Cthulhu Rebirth, which is one of the worst draws in this scenario, just without those artifacts and needing Metalcraft.
Yeah, not really helping you at all. So let's see, I find my land drop really huge here. Kind of worried at this point that I'm maybe not hitting my land drops, but I find some things with the Sea Beyond here. I really like the cards I draw again. Words of Wisdom I think is really bad against the red decks. And we found a Brainstorm and Accumulate Knowledge, and I really like that. And you are having a slow start, so everything's going fine for me so far.
Yeah, so this hand certainly has not been optimal, so I think in this scenario, draw an untapped mountain, so that's really nice for me. So I'm going to be able to play that and have 3 mana and an open artifact there. So this leads open for a few different lines, but I think the best line here is just Skyfisher back that artifact. Keeping the options open for a potential Metacraft if I can find it later on, and also being able to uh, keep on the ground and apply some pressure.
Yeah, so I actually brainstormed the end of turn, so that's a choice which might be a little bit questionable. Um, but I think it works out really well because we get to see fetch land and some cards which we don't want to see. And about your hand, maybe a little bit. It's just really well to see now. I think that there's just this conflicting strategy going on. You want to get to Metalcraft because you want to turn on this Galvanic Blast, but you have 2 Rebirth now, and you kind of want to blow up the Spellbomb, I would assume, just to have that extra damage and get that damage in before I start to fog. And then there's also the Dead Journey. I'm just not happy with what's happening in your hand at this time.
Yeah, that mulligan decision is definitely not helping me right here. So, um, moving on, let's look and see you got your brainstorm. So it looks like a pretty decent hand you have crafted here.
Yeah, I think the choices I made there weren't that good. I think keeping the Quietus Repair, maybe throwing away the words is a better choice. Because Quietus Repair is an okay thing to have against you, and I don't want you to draw extra cards.
That definitely makes sense. The Quietus Repair certainly seemed very, very strong in this matchup. So we're getting in here with the core Skyfisher, just getting that damage in. And at this point, kind of come to an interesting decision. We're not finding those artifacts that I really need to see. So at this point, I feel that it's necessary to just throw down the Rebirth, draw the card from the Origin Spellbomb, because hitting you for 2 damage each turn just gives you a lot of time to continue finding exactly what you need to really close out the game quickly. So I need to find some Metalcraft, apply some pressure, or do something so that you have to start using those fogs and can't just have all your mana to keep crafting your hand.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Especially since the turn before I transmit into Jace, I'm showing you actively. I'm gonna punish you for being slow.
hmm So yeah, definitely needed to get something on the board there. Still not a great turn right there. Just having a lot of open mana and not doing too much.
Yeah, I'm playing the Jace here, tapping double blue, just so I have right control open in case you're gonna do something crazy like triple lightning bolt. But otherwise, if I don't have to fog, I can accumulate knowledge. So it's really important how you tap with this 3-color mana base. And now you're hitting for 5, of course, which is a lot more than 2. And you can see the amount of respect I actually had, because I was really considering, like, I have to keep white and green open here. I don't know if he somehow manages to cheat like 10 damage in this turn.
Yeah, I wish I had that many burn spells, but looking at my draw another untapped land, which is not great. So now we're starting to flood out a little bit, not seeing any of the artifacts that are really needed. So just start Skyfishing, put a little more pressure on the board. This is a little debatable at this point, especially against the Turbofog deck. Just how much pressure you want to put on the board because you're running Keep Watch and Riot Control. How many creatures do you want out there? But I feel it's necessary. At this point, that makes it a much more respectable clock. And attacking for 7 means that 2 lightning bolts is all that's needed, and it really forces out a fog.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Well, I draw a Quietus Repair, which at first I don't really like. Um, but in the next few turns, I'm gonna realize that if I die, it's gonna be to the burn spells. I mean, look at my hand. I have 2 Moments Peace, 1 Riot Control. I'm gonna have Fox for days. The only way I die is if you overload me with uh, burn spells. So Quietus Repair is really actually pretty good in this situation.
Yeah, so looking on that Cryotis repair, I mean that really it really helps shut the game out for me. So I know you can't play it this turn because you got to keep that fog up. Just making sure that I'm not able to attack in for too many. But right now, I think that was a really strong draw, especially against the BorosKitty deck that plans to end the game with burn.
Yeah, I actually think now in hindsight, knowing how this all played out, I should have just kept it. Uh, when I brainstormed, I put it on the very top and then I transmuted. So we should have just kept it and transmuted one of the words away because you never really want to cast words of wisdom against a deck which plays Galvanic Blast and Lightning Bolt.
Yeah. Um, so here we got the right control, which thankfully I wasn't able to Cthulhu Rebirth again because that would have been bad for me. But at this point, drawing another Journey, which is just a completely dead card, not finding anything, it's becoming a choice of, well, at what point do I have to start sling burn spells? But right now you're at such a high total, it really doesn't matter. It's not going to bring you down close to low enough to really kill you.
Well, the thing is, Galvanic Blast is a shock right now. It's really, really bad.
Yeah.
And you have like at least like four dead cards in your hand. If you kind of count Galvanic Blast as half a dead card. So it's really not looking good. There goes the Quiet Disrepair. Still 4 Fox in hand. And yeah, it really doesn't look good.
Yeah, at this point, I think the game has definitely shifted your way. Get another core Skyfisher there, which is not great in this scenario. More creatures is not what's needed. Just because, I mean, with all the fog in your hand and the fog that I know you have, because you've only used, what, 1, 2 fog spells at this point, and I know you have...
Only right control so far.
Yeah. So I know there's a lot more in there. So actually playing this here was a debatable choice whether I actually needed to play it because I know you're going to be able to fog for days, and it helps fuel riot control and also keep watch. So that was a little bit of a debatable decision, but I ended up going with it just to try to almost apply lethal so that it forces a fog every turn.
I think it's the right decision. You want to be as close to lethal on the board as possible at all times. So I would definitely always play creatures if you're not close to lethal. And right control is going to happen one way or the other, but I mean, if you have more creatures, you're also doing more damage, so it kind of equalizes.
Yeah. So, I mean, the other reason to keep the Skyfisher there is just in case you draw, like, the Sanctifiers, like, right there, or, like, what's right there, to be able to potentially recast those is very, very valuable, or potentially draw more cards after an Ichor Wellspring or something else that's drawn. And here we see the Quiet Disrepair really kicking in, and the game is really starting to look bad for me.
Yeah, what I just want to point out is that I cast, like, a double words here, and you drew the core sanctifiers off of it, so this is something that you really have to keep in mind when you play words. Your opponent is drawing extra cards, he will most likely draw into something that hurts you. Words is very good against deck like, I don't know, Stompy, Elves, White Weenie, which don't really have something they can draw into that you are worried about. But against decks playing counter spells, against decks playing hate, or against decks playing burn, you have to use this very, very carefully, and I had to use it because it was the only draw spell in my hand, and I do get punished for this as you do draw a core sanctifier.
Yeah, that's definitely that may be the best draw for me at this point is being able to get that Quiet Disrepair and the Jace's erasure off the board. So here we see a nice Ponder. Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, so I decided to keep that. That was actually a pretty bad pile, I think. 2 lands. We absolutely don't need 2 lands. But I like the model so much, and I realized I can just get the model and transmute, and that's gonna be alright because transmute is shuffling.
Yeah. So looking nice right there, and then we also see the third Moment's Peace. So I mean, you just have fogs for days right now.
I actually have way more fogs than I would like to here. I would much rather have an Arcane Annul up in case you have some enchantment hate, which obviously we know now you do, and some more draw spells. You know, you want to have options. You want to have everything in your hand. You don't want to be stuck playing only a certain amount of, or just with. Basically, we have three fogs, and we have like 1 counter spell against Galvanic Blast. That's what we have on hand. It's not that versatile, and you can see here I'm really respecting the deck. I'm always sure that I have that Dawn Charm open in case there comes a triple Galvanic Blast my way. But obviously you're far away from Metalcraft.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's not happening at this point. So we see the Core Sanctifiers come down here and try to take out the Jace's Erasure, which is a little bit of a debatable choice with 2 mana up and cards in hand, but with the amount of lands you have, the chance for another open opportunity is probably not coming. So best to just play it there, as I don't think I'm going to be able to really play around the Arcane Denial anytime soon.
I think this is definitely where I play. Especially if you do know the list, you will know that I play only 2 Arcane in our main.
Hmm.
I did not transmit into a single one, and you're baiting here counter spells, I believe, right?
Yeah. So I throw those. I know the burn at this point isn't going to be
Yeah.
able to get me there. So we've seen a lot of it coming out in Metalcraft. It's not happening. Um, it's not going to happen at this point. So just trying to see if any counter spell is coming and seeing the way you react, especially with the clock and that kind of thing. And in the end, just end up playing the Core Sanctifiers because it looks like it's safe.
Yeah. So I thought about this at first if I was gonna Dawn Charm, and I thought I didn't even realize that he didn't have Metalcraft for some reason. And I thought, well, I'm gonna take one, and then if he has another, I'm gonna use it. And then I only lost 2 life, and I realized, well, this is just 2 damage. I don't care. I'd rather
Yeah.
save the Dawn Charm for a Lightning Bolt. That's 50% more value. But then we get blown out. Well, blown out is maybe a little bit too harsh, but you get at least 2 for 1 here. But luckily, I already have a second Jesus Erasure, and of course, we draw the Arcane and all just 1 turn too late.
Yeah, so we see the second Jaces, and at this point, I still got 29 cards in the deck, but I'm not sure exactly. I got one more Core Sanctifier, yeah, Core Sanctifiers on the list, and also one more Core Skyfisher, which is really the only way to get that back. So at this point, I don't really have many ways to get that off the board.
Yeah, and you can see that I'm hitting pretty much all my land drops, and eventually I will be able to like play 3 or 4 draw spells in the same turn and go for the kill, even with just one Jace, because I will just draw like 10 cards. So you have to really worry, not necessarily think about how many cards are left in my library, but how many cards can my opponent mill in a single turn, especially if he plays Jace, brainstorm, accumulate knowledge, or something crazy like that.
Yeah. So I think sadly is a lot of the time the opponent can't really pay attention too much to how many or what clock you have. If they can't really do too much, like in this scenario. Um, I can't really do anything. My best hope is to be able to draw into 1 or 2 burn spells and hope that you don't have the counter spell to stop that or can't mill me out before that happens.
Well, yeah, your plan here has to be hoping uh, that I screw over on Fox, but I don't draw Fox. But seeing our hand, we know it's not gonna happen. And
Mhm.
otherwise, overload us with burn spells, and that's actually your best plan right now. And that might actually work if you drew lucky, I would say, or if you somehow manage to maybe get Metalcraft online.
Mhm.
But it doesn't look good.
Yeah, not at all. I I will be right back. It looks like I've got a little family thing to attend to.
Okay.
All right, sorry about that. All right, so it's looking pretty bleak for me here. I was able to draw 1 lightning bolt. There's still 2 lightning bolts left in my deck, which really the only hope for me here is that he either runs out of a fog or I'm able to top deck that lightning bolt without counter up. But certainly isn't looking too nice.
Yeah, hang on. It's paused. That's correct. And I'm kind of missing some draw spells, but otherwise I think I'm fine. Especially
Yeah.
since I have like 2 moments piece still in my hand and one in the graveyard, which I just used.
So yeah, draw another Cthulhu Rebirth, which with only drawing 1 artifact this game has not been too useful, so those will keep me stuck in my hand.
So I think I do the shenanigans here, and I think it's the right choice. If I don't do it, then it's definitely a mistake. No, I do it now. So if this is something a lot of people don't know you can do, or just don't I don't know, don't do, but I think here it's definitely the right choice to counter your own Moment's Peace. We have too many Fogs. Probably don't need the Arcane and all, because we can Dawn Charm instead. And
Yeah.
I choose to take this here. The idea is to go down as much as we can and save the Dawn Charm for when actually lethal damage happens.
Yeah, I think that's the right choice. Certainly interesting, but based on this, you really don't have any draw in your hand, and you need to be able to find that draw quickly, just to make sure they're able to keep going and keep the milling happening. So, looks like a draw Brainstorm and a Words of Wisdom off that countered Arcane Denial. So it seemed like it'd be a pretty good draw.
Yeah. And we see we find another counter, so we replaced one of our Moments Piece with Brainstorm Words of Wisdom, which was huge, right?
Yes, for sure. You still have a lot of those fogs up. You got the Moment's Peace in the hand, the Moment's Peace in the graveyard.
Yeah,
So
even if I didn't have a second Moments Piece, it would probably still be the right decision, because it's more likely I die because I just don't draw Fox in time. If I just don't do anything, because then I only draw like 2 cards. This way I draw more cards before I run out of Fox.
yeah, definitely. So we draw in here. I think this turn we're gonna go Core Skyfisher, bounce the Sanctifiers, and then try to replay it. Just try to get that erasure off the board. So again, this is really one of the best values with Core Sanctifiers, especially in these long matchups like this. Being able to return it to the hand and then potentially replay it to get rid of that erasure, which is a relatively big threat right now.
Yeah, this could have been very, very difficult for me, but obviously I have an Arcanal, and if I didn't have that Arcanal, it could have looked really bleak for me. You might have been able to edge out a win, especially if you top deck like a Lightning Bolt or two. So
Yeah,
this was not over at this point, but I mean after the Sanctifier gets countered, I think it's not looking very good, but especially since I just drew another Brainstorm here, and now we get to mill you really a lot, and geez, there's the accumulate knowledge. It's really looking good here for me now.
yeah, definitely. I mean, my best chance there was to be able to draw something or be able to get rid of that erasure right there. And right now, it looks like you've got this game pretty much on lock, unless I'm able to draw a really quick lightning bolt off this Arcane Denial.
Yeah, I think if the Sanctifier resolves, probably win.
Yeah. But looking at these, the lightning bolt, the final lightning bolt, there's only one left in the deck right now. Actually, didn't get milled through any of that, so there's still the chance I'm able to draw it, upkeep through this Arcane Denial, which main choice for why I draw two. Um, so I think with the Arcane Denial, it's usually best for the opponent just to draw the cards.
Yeah,
Uh, I mean, especially in this case, you're going to be able to mill me out either way.
yeah.
It's just about finding that lightning bolt. And then it doesn't happen, so that's pretty much game over.
I mean, most of the milling is happening in the last like 2 turns or so. Like you can see, I milled you like 20 cards in my turn and your end step if you add these up. So it wouldn't have really mattered if you didn't draw two maybe once before or twice before, because in the last turn it doesn't. I can easily mill you like instead of 10 cards like 14 cards.
Hmm. For sure.
Usually you overmill, like the opponent is down to 0 and you mill another 5 cards or so, just because you have 2 or 3 Jaces and your last spell drew like 2 cards or it was a Brainstorm. So not drawing cards with Arcana is pretty much always a mistake, I think.
Yeah. So I don't know how much does that generally happen for people not drawn from Arcane Denial.
It has happened before. I don't judge them ever, but because they know how to play the deck better than I do, but I would say it's pretty much always a mistake. So let me actually let this recording go on a little bit before we start to talk, so I can sort the cards so you have a better look. So we're gonna go through myself sideboarding first, and then you're just gonna say what you sideboard, because I would have to put up your video and I don't want to do that.
Okay.
That'll be a hassle. So we see I'm considering here riot control. Riot control is pretty obviously good. Well, let's actually hear what you have to say. What you would board here.
Well, I don't know your deck as well as you, But personally, I like the Circle of Protection red. I mean, one of the best ways for me to be able to kill you is if I'm able to get those burn spells down, because with the creatures in my deck, it's just not going to be fast enough without it. So I do like that card here. With that, I've also been a fan of the Hydroplast and the Crite Disrepair. But for what you're taking out here, I wouldn't be against taking out potentially. I'm not really sure. I mean, I haven't played the deck as much as you, so what are you considering taking out right now?
Well, taking out stuff is always difficult here because the deck is really, at least in part, a combo deck which really needs a certain engine going. So you want at least like a third of your deck, or like I'm gonna say like 12 or 14 spells to be draw spells, which actually draw a decent amount of cards. So you can't board out too many draw spells. On the other hand, you obviously can't board out too many fogs because you need to be able to draw into these fogs. And what we're left at is contours and win conditions, and again something you really can't board out. So there's nothing to board out in a way, but obviously we have to board out something. So what we try to do, or what I try to do, is identify the cards which have the least value, which sounds like the most obvious thing ever, but I mean that's really what you have to do. And I think here Words of Wisdom has very low value because it draws you cards. Um, I think Arcane Annal might be something that one could think about generally about that type of deck because it draws you more cards. It will, if I Arcane Annal Lightning Bolt and you draw 2 Galvanic Blasts off of it, I did exactly nothing, worse than nothing. So Arcane Annal might be something you could think about, but Arcane Annal is my only thing that hits Core Sanctifier, so I need to absolutely keep Arcane Annal in. And yeah, I think the most obvious is like cut 2 Words of Wisdom and cut 2 Ponder. And I think that's, you don't want to cut more draw than that, and Words of Wisdom is just because it draws you a card, and Ponder is sorcery speed and doesn't generate card advantage.
Yeah, I definitely can see that. The words, I mean, from your draw spells perspective, it definitely has the lowest impact, and I think you have a lot of really high impact cards in your sideboard that you're able to bring in. So I can definitely see being able to cut a few of those words, which aren't going to make a huge difference, and then being able to bring in some of those high impact sideboard cards.
Yeah, so I'm actually thinking about boarding out Quiet Disrepair at this point. I do like the Quiet Disrepair, but we did get blown out, and there's a high potential that you just destroy our Jays and we lose our Quiet Disrepair too.
Hmm.
So what I'm just thinking here, all the cards, bring in all the cards for now, which are good. I think Arcane Annal is very good against Sanctifier. Circle of Protection is very good against Galvanic Blast, and Hydroblast just because I'm worried about Flaring Pain at this point. But we will see that I'm at 69, and I realize now that there's just not even close to enough cards to cut for this.
Hmm.
So I decide against the Hydroblast just because it's such a wild card which I don't know, and which I only really want if you do play Flaring Pain, which we don't know yet. And so that goes. That's the first thing to go. And I think now it's okay. What we are looking at, we probably cut 2 Ponder, 2 Words, and then we will have to find one more card, which isn't that big of a deal.
Yeah.
I'm still debating here Quiet Disrepair and Circle of Protection Red. How much do you really need these? Can you maybe play again without them?
So I definitely like the Circle Protection red as, I mean, pretty much 90% of the games BorosKitty is going to win against this deck is going to come from those burn spells. And being able to have Circle of Protection up just means that you don't have to have, you know, as many spells in your hand keeping up to prevent. You don't need the Arcane Denial to prevent those, final burn spells. I do really like Circle Protection red.
Yeah. So it seems like I decided actually to cut the CB on Driven Words. I find that very interesting. I could definitely see why, since the idea is when I have Circle of Protection, I don't care about you drawing Galvanic Blast, and when I have Arcane Annal, I don't care about you drawing Core Sanctifiers. I think both are definitely possible. You can cut the words over the CB on or the other way around. So that's how I sideboard it. Let me actually go back so we can look at that while we talk about your way. So how did you sideboard and why? Oh, hang on, I'm
Uh,
gonna put this up
well,
again.
I think it's interesting. The BorosKitty list I run actually has more cards to take out than it really wants to put in. So you're going to see the 4 Journey to Nowhere that basically come out instantaneously. You got the Flame Slash that comes out instantaneously. So that's 5 cards you want to take out that have basically no impact on this whatsoever. To bring in, you're going to bring in 2 Pyroblasts and 2 Patrician Score. Just based off, those are by far, the best 2 cards against your list. Patrician Score, and I wish I would have packed more in my sideboard. That's really a fantastic card. And it's hard to see coming when, a person's tapped out. Definitely make it seem like, okay, well, it's fine if I counter, this last spell if I go for something, and the Patrician Score can come down and really provide some good blowouts. Past that, Flame Slash, Electrically, Circular Protection, Red, and Dust to Dust are all basically terrible against your deck. And we took out 5 cards, only brought in 4. So I also brought in the Obsidian Acolyte, just because it's the only other card that has even somewhat impact on the game.
Yeah. Well, this is kind of a theme against my deck because most decks play removal, and removal is just dead against me. So most decks are stuck at boarding out like 4 to 8 removal spells, and having not enough sideboard cards that matter. So, but I think the boarding here is pretty straightforward, and I think you said everything that is to say really. So let's have a look at game 2.
All right, sounds good.
So something we might have thought about too is Restful Very here on my side, by the way. But yeah, I think with right control and the amount of creatures you play, I don't really need that extra Restful Very, and I would rather play a Quiet Disrepair than a Restful Very.
I would agree with that. I think the Quiet Disrepair is in general going to be a higher impact, probably getting 2 to 4 Liced at minimal before it's destroyed, and even if it's destroyed, it's not the worst.
So let's have a look at the hands before we see who keeps here. So let's start with your hand.
Yeah. So my hand in this case, it's certainly a lot better than the last hand. You have Core Sanctifiers, which is one of the best cards in this list. And also you got a 1-mana artifact and Core Skyfisher along with Glinthark to be able to get that back to my hand and really get early aggression. 2 untapped lands, which is great. I wish they were artifact lands. And you also have a Cthulhu Rebirth, which could be fantastic if we want to sacrifice that Origin Spellbomb and draw a card. So the biggest concern here is a lack of artifacts, and also a lack of burn spells. But with a relatively aggressive start, I'm hoping to get out the gates early, hopefully be able to Core Sanctify the first Jace that comes by, and apply quite a bit of pressure right out the gate.
Yeah, this hand looks like a lot better, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely can be faster.
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
So my own hand, I think it's okay. It's pretty obvious what we want to do. We want to go for fast blue with fetch. Turn 2, we want to have accumulate knowledge open, so we can guarantee maybe, or at least make it more likely to hit our third land drop. We need to draw into a white source, or we need to draw into Moment's Peace. That's for sure. We want to have access to a fog relatively soon. But the deck looks very versatile, or not the deck, the hand looks very versatile. We have a fog, we have a counter, we have 2 draw, and a win condition. There's just something of everything there. I would kind of want something else than Keep Watch. Keep Watch seems very bad in this hand, and the mana base doesn't seem that great. Obviously, it would be way better if the forest was a plains.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this hand, looks like the biggest concern is if you're not able to draw that white source soon enough, you eventually left fogless for at least a little while a lot of damage comes in. But overall, it looks like a pretty decent hand.
Yeah, I think my biggest concern was also that you might raise me and be too fast, or that I would not be able to find lands in general or miss my land drops, because the first accumulate knowledge only draws you 1 card. But we are on the draw, so we should be fine here.
Yeah. All right. So we both keep the hands, and then I'm going to start off with a land and then an Origin Spellbomb. Pretty basic start here, just getting out that Spellbomb so we can get a land out early, or so we can get a Glinthawk or a Core Skyfisher out early, and so it works well.
Yeah, I draw a Jace, which is just a blank here. It doesn't do anything.
Yeah. So we go in Skyfisher back, the Origin Spellbomb, just being able to use them in effectively. Draw Prophetic Prism, which is not a bad draw, being able to grab another artifact to hopefully get close to Metalcraft, but it's not the optimal thing we got to be seeing.
So right now I'm worried that I'm really not gonna hit my land drop. We get to draw 2 more cards. One of Accumulate Knowledge, one in our draw step, and missing the land drop here I think would be the first step on the road to losing.
Yeah, definitely, and I'm able to apply or to get down that Glint Hawk again, which now it's 4 damage a turn, which is looking pretty nice with the amount of fog in your hand, which is not great.
Yeah, so I luckily hit the land drop, but we can already see that your hand is gonna be probably Origin Spellbomb because it'll probably work next turn. So you're really putting pressure on the board, and it's if I hadn't drawn that land, I think I probably would have lost.
Yeah. So we see we get in for more damage here, go to 14. And then the play here is just to get the land down, put down the Origin Spellbomb, and also draw a card. It is a little debatable whether you want to do that with the Rebirth and potentially having a Riot Control in the hand, but I think getting as much power down on the board is definitely more important at the stage of the game.
Yeah, yeah, as I said before, I would just not care about Riot Control. I would only think about how much life does my opponent have right now, and get as close as possible to lethal.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. So it looks like you're going to get your white source here, and then you're going to have Riot Control in the upkeep, and also already have an Erasure down.
Yeah, so now we're in a tough position because we didn't hit our land drop, and we have an Accumulate Knowledge, which would draw us 2 cards, probably hitting a land drop. But unless we draw a Moment's Peace or a Dawn Charm and a land, which is like really unlikely, we wouldn't have a Fog Ban, and you would attack for 7, we go down to 7. Just a
Yeah,
real headache.
I definitely think it's the right choice to keep up the Riot Control and also the Keep Watch here. Interesting that you choose to Keep Watch and not do the Riot Control. So what are your thoughts on that move?
So my thought was, I actually went there and I thought, well, I have to keep a Riot Control open to be prepared for any eventuality. And like, if you would lead with something like Lightning Bolt, I would definitely Riot Control in response. But then I thought, well, he's attacking for 5 here, or with 5. Keywatch would be really good here, not only because we already have a Jace down, but that means we probably hit our land drops. And even if we Riot Control here, and we don't hit our land drop yet again, and he plays a creature, this next turn is going to be exactly the same thing. We're going to have to Riot Control again, and then if we don't draw a land again and not a fog, we are dead. So we need to draw cards. I mean, maybe we don't. Maybe our top decks are going to be insane, but to play in a reasonable fashion, we have to draw cards. Our hand is not sustainable, basically. And if you need to draw cards, you want to do it as early as possible instead of fogging now and then, eating the next attack, which is probably going to be bigger. We eat the attack this turn, use the Keep Watch to draw a lot of cards, and basically when you draw 5 cards, I'm going to hit my land drop, and next turn I will have maybe a 2-mana fog and a counterspell up or something. So I think it is risky. We could definitely die this turn. But it probably works out more often than it doesn't, and it's probably the right line here. Especially since you don't have Metalcraft, and double Galvanic Glass is not a thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree. With only one artifact on the board, there's not too many plays other than potentially red artifact land, and then maybe a 2-mana, like a Prosthetic Prism, or an Ichor Wellspring, and then 2 Galvanic Blasts. I mean, I have to have a lot of things in order to actually kill you that turn with the amount of burn. So I think it's definitely the right decision, although it was something interesting at the time. And I think it is a little telling about your hand when you Keep Watch instead of Fog right there.
Yeah. I mean, this was definitely born out of necessity. And I think the only thing I died to here is like a Mountain or any other red source, a triple Lightning Bolt, or like 2 Lightning Bolts and a Galvanic Blast. And that's really unlikely, and I'm okay if you have double Lightning Bolt and I go to 1, because we're gonna Riot Control next turn, go back to 6.
Yeah. I definitely think it's the right play. I mean, here I think I ended up playing the Core Sanctifiers to get rid of the Erasure, but I was debating playing the Prism. Playing the Prism here, it allows you to draw a card in a case where our hand right now is not very good. I mean, you just draw 5 cards, or you just drew 5 cards. You've got 11 cards in hand, which means chances are you have what you want to. So I think there's definitely an argument for playing the Prism, trying to draw into something to stop you at this point from continuing there, drawing Sunburn, more draw, something, potentially getting Metalcraft online. So I think there's definitely a case to play the Prism there and not play the Sanctifiers. But in the end, with so many cards in hand, I wanted to make sure I get that off the board while a counter is not up.
Yeah, I think it definitely makes sense. I would have played the same way. Removing the Jace is really high priority, and you can see me here. 11 cards in hand. Sadly, we didn't hit a 2-mana fog, which would have been great because then we could have slammed the second Jace. Or, yeah, first Jace again, since our first Jace got removed. So the idea here is now, what do we want to discard? And I think this is a really tough decision to make. You can't discard either Riot Control, you can't discard either Jace, so I'm kind of putting the cards which I don't want to discard to the very left. We have to at least keep one more land to hit the next land. Then we at least want to keep our good draw spell, which is Accumulate Knowledge. We definitely want to keep our Cannon against against Sanctifiers, and then that's 7 cards right there. But if I look at the 4 cards, which would then be discarded, a land, second land wouldn't be bad, 2 Muddle, which is really good because Muddle can get us a Moment's Peace, and a Words. I think Words is the only thing I really don't care about. I think I would be, if I had to choose, like definitely the worst cards here are Words, Wisdom, and Forest. And then the second worst cards are the Muddles, but I would really, really like to keep a single Muddle, but the 4 cards on the right here just have to be the worst, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the only other argument you could potentially make is saying get rid of either one of the Riot Control or one of the Erasure. But I think with the Erasure, I mean, I've already got the Sanctifiers on board. There's a high possibility that I have more enchantment removal and be able to remove one or both of them. And after that, you only have one in your deck.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, you only have 2 fogs in hand right now. You like to keep that number at least decently high to make sure you're not dying to a lethal board presence right now.
Yeah, I think the 4 cards on the very right are actually the worst cards. Not in that order, but they definitely are.
Yeah.
And I do choose these 4 cards, and that's the right choice. Muddle is too slow right now. If we had like 2 more mana, then I would probably keep a Muddle over Riot Control and just next turn Muddle into Moment's Peace.
Yeah. So this turn, we see attacking with just those creatures. That was actually a mistake. I should have attacked with the Core Sanctifiers and 1 Goblin to minimize another Keep Watch potentially, but you need to use the Riot Control there, gain a bunch of life. And at this point, I'm kind of stuck on getting that Prism down, playing a land. I got to play the Obsidian Acolyte here, which is not the optimal play.
You can see
certainly a card.
You can see that I was immediately surprised to see that card. I had to look at it for a short moment. Also, you have Metalcraft now, which is something to keep in mind. But I'm at 13 life, so I feel reasonably safe.
Yeah, and I choose not to do the Rebirth there just because I have almost a lethal presence on the board, or a board that's big enough where getting 1 attack in and burn is, fine enough, and it makes the Riot Controls just that much better. So it's really not necessary, and I can potentially draw a card later with Wellspring, so.
Yeah, I decided not to play Jace because I wanted to hit land drops. Basically, my idea in the turn before was, I don't want to play Jace and then Riot Control and be tapped out. What if he has another Sanctifier, or if he has Skyfisher into Sanctifier? So I played the Accumulate Knowledge to draw more cards, hit land drops, and eventually I will have enough mana, basically 6 mana, to play Jace, Moment's Peace, and have our Canonal up in the same turn. Sadly, we did not hit our land drop, despite drawing a lot of cards. But we found some Brainstorms, which are not that good if you don't have a fetch land, but looky here, there's a fetch land. And I think, let's talk about this before I actually do this. Probably Words of Wisdom and 1 Fog, and I'm not sure if it has to be Moment's Peace or Dawn Charm. Well, no, but it's Dawn Charm Words of Wisdom, I think, because we're not worried about burn at all right now, and the
Mhm.
Moment's Peace is just a strictly better fog. And the Words of Wisdom we don't really need because Brainstorm is pretty good if you have a Jace down.
Yeah, I think those are definitely the right ones. Words, I mean, low impact, and right now you're 20 life, far out of burn range. I think more importantly, it is to make sure that those creatures don't hit me because I mean the burn's not going to go to the face, but you do end up putting away one of the moments piece and not the dawn charm.
Yeah, I think it's debatable. I think in hindsight it's debatable, just because of our life total. If our life total was lower, I could definitely see playing this way.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's okay. It's both okay.
So yeah, I don't think it's a huge decision, but I think I probably would have kept the moments piece there.
Yeah, I agree in hindsight.
Um,
I probably
so
wasn't aware just how high my life total was at this point.
yeah. So you attack there, get a fog, and then draw a Beetleback Chief. Again, I'm pretty sure I choose not to play it because with how high the life total is, it's not hugely necessary. No, I do. Um, well, I think it's an interesting choice. I think that one of the most important things against fog is making sure you always have near lethal on the board. And looking at that board, it was only what 9 life or 9 damage or so.
10 I
10,
count.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so getting down 4 more all of a sudden puts you into 2 lightning bolt range, um, or 2 burn spells range basically, which means that the fogging must continue. And so I don't know. I think that might not have been the. I think that was the right choice in hindsight. Just making sure there's enough damage on the board to present lethal.
Yeah, I agree. As I said before, always try to get to lethal. And I just see there that I milled you a Patrician Scorn at some point, and I didn't even notice that before, so I get a little bit worried there about my Jaces. Definitely don't want to commit too many Jaces to the board now. And we draw another Accumulate Knowledge, which is really great because now we have a 2 mana fog here. We can keep open Arcane Annal if you want to try to Sanctify. And if you don't have Sanctifiers, we can accumulate knowledge at the end step. But there's Patrician Scorn, which is an instant, I believe.
Yes, it's an instant, and also, I mean, if I play a white spell that turn, it can come down without paying the mana cost.
Yeah,
So it's definitely a scary card, and I do like it in the deck list just because it represents that if I play a white spell that turn, it's going to be difficult to play any draw spells there.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, you have to keep that in mind at least. But I wouldn't be too bad to trade that single Jace here for a Patrician Scorn, I would think. And we mill another piece of hate, 2 pieces of hate actually. Oblivion Ring isn't that bad either, and the Sanctifier, so that's really good mills. And look at our draws. We drew a Circle of Protection Red, and our hand here. Let's just talk about our hand for a moment. Our hand is pretty solid. We have a Circle of Protection Red, which means unless you have Flaring Pain, we're not gonna die to Galvanic Blast or Lightning Bolt this game. We have 1 moment's piece left, but we have a muddle which can get us another moment's piece. We have a Brainstorm and a Fetch Land and Jace, so there's just insane amount of value, and we have Arcana against anything like Patrician Scorn or Sanctifier. So our hand is really, really solid. Um, I think this is probably like the best hand you could have. I mean, if the muddle was already a moment's piece, then it would be a little bit better. But um, this is an insane hand, and at this point, I feel very, very solid in this position, especially with 16 life.
Yeah. So I mean, I definitely like the hand here. It puts you in a really solid position. And I think that me throwing the burn spell at the face last turn is kind of almost a show of desperation here. And it certainly, I think, makes you a little more confident in what you have right there.
Yeah, definitely. So we get to Brainstorm here, which, if we draw bad spells, we can just mill them away. I'm not sure if we actually do that, because I think it's okay to draw 1 fetch land here. Yeah, I think I just mill you, and I just decide my hand is so good, it's okay to draw 2 fetch lands.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I think with what you have at hand, especially drawing that moment's piece, I mean, you're just loaded for quite a while at this point.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I blow up the fetch land here, but I think that would be the right choice.
Yeah, I agree. I
Yeah,
think it's the lowest thing in the hand.
Yeah, and I don't want to draw yet another land. I think that would be just one land too many. We're at 8, and 8, about 8 you feel comfortable unless you're playing against blue decks and you need to play like 3 counters in the same turn. Starting at 8 is really where I don't really care if I draw any more lands.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I can see that. Um, so we see the attack here, another moment's piece. And at this point, I just keep drawing lands, starting to flood out a little bit. And the majority of the hate and the burn has been milled. So at this point, I'm definitely in a losing position. And we see that Riot Control and the Circle of Protection. I think you've got this game almost unlocked at this point.
Yeah, I think the only thing that's interesting here now is what do we want to transmit into? I mean, we're definitely going to transmit this turn because even after transmit, we're going to have 5 mana open, which is enough for 3 mana Fog plus Arcane and all. I think you could transmit into Moment's Peace here, or the obvious other choice is Accumulate Knowledge because we have 3 Accumulate Knowledge from the graveyard. The 4th is obviously going to be a huge draw spell, and I believe I go for the Accumulate Knowledge, and I believe that is the right play. So actually, I'm going to even have 1 more mana because we haven't played a land yet, so we would have 1 mana open for Circle of Protection, and I do go for the Accumulate Knowledge.
I think the Accumulate Knowledge is, a strong pick right here, drawing those 4 cards, and also the fact that I'm at 19 cards in the library right now, and that leaves it with the fact that with 2 Jace's Erasures on the board, 1 or 2 more draw spells, and that's lethal.
Yeah, well, drawing 4 cards is probably lethal. It's gonna mill you half your deck, and then if we draw like Words Brainstorm or like Ponder Brainstorm, we probably win next turn. Or we could just Arcane our own spell next turn and win probably that way because we don't have to keep Arcane open. We have Circle of Protection red, and you're most likely not going to be able to kill our Jace in our own turn.
Yeah. So I'm able to Skyfisher back the Sanctifiers this turn. And I think I do it, I'm not sure. Yeah, I think you ended up countering this. And I think that's the right decision.
Yeah.
And we see the Arcane Denials here. Both those triggers go on the stack. And again, choose to draw 2 cards. And from the cards I draw into, it didn't really help. I don't know if there was any 2-card combination that was really going to get me out of this situation, but Prism and Kabira Crossroads was definitely not the 2.
Yeah. Well, I think if you had like a Patrician Scorn in hand there, and you played the Sanctifier and then the Scorn, you would have probably won the game again.
Yeah, I think that was the best chance, was being able to get those 2 out. But from the looks of it, I think that the other Sanctifier I had was milled out. Actually, it was milled out right there. I never ended up having it in hand. So I don't know what else I could have done there to prevent it. But and now with the Brainstorm here, I just go and mill out the rest of the cards in the deck, and that's game.
I decide actually to not let you untap because you might have like 4 Galvanic Blast in hand. Probably not because there's a lot of in your graveyard, but I choose to play Words here so you die before you untap. And that's the match.
Yeah, and that was it.
Yeah. Show the graveyard.
Yeah, so we can see the list here. That game definitely didn't draw as much hate as I would have liked. Got the Patrician Score, Pyroblast, Oblivion Ring. Ended up drawing the Sanctifiers, was able to use it twice. But ended up not being enough. So I think with that game, had the early start, but wasn't able to draw enough burn. And then the Riot Control and also the Keep Watch at the beginning really ended up killing me there.
Yeah, but I think this was a lot less convincing than it might seem to some if you say like, oh, it's a 2-0 victory, or it looked pretty convincing in the end, but there were a lot of ways this could have gone wrong. If you had 2 pieces of hate at any time in your hand, like a Sanctifier and a Scorn, if you had a Pyroblast against the Arcane or something like that, or, the Keep Watch could have gone wrong. I could have maybe died there. I could have easily missed my land drops in the early game. I mean, part of this is that I just played it correctly, that I realized that drawing cards with Keep Watch at that moment was the better play because I needed to hit my land drops and stuff. But there was definitely potential for this to go sideways, and I was just a little bit fortunate to mill you all the or a lot of hate cards, and that you only had one hate card at a time. I was able to find the Arcane Annals. I was able to find. I was really fortunate to find Jaces again and again and again. Um,
Yeah.
and I think I maybe got a little bit lucky here, but it's definitely also very much down to playing this deck very effectively. But I still have a lot of respect for your deck, and I'm still uh, very careful, and I know just how fast it can push you out, and I don't think this is like a pushover or anything. And it's definitely a great deck. I think this is one of the uh, if I wouldn't play BantFog, I think this deck is probably one of the decks which I would most likely go to, just because I like all the synergy, all the value associated with just all the combos.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think this deck is really a lot of fun to play if you like kind of grindy, a little slower Magic, and definitely control Magic. And when it comes to this matchup, I do think it's closer than these games entailed. But when the BantFog list is doing well, it looks like everything was perfect the whole match, and there was no risk of anything going wrong. Just because if they keep throwing off those fogs, it seems like they continuously have them. So I think a lot of wins from the BantFog list look a lot more dominant than they end up being. Um, but at that same point, I think I did make a few misplays, especially in game one, that definitely didn't help. And I think you played these games both very well. And I think, especially with the BantFog list, it's one that really rewards you for playing the deck correctly. And it's something that not a lot of people manage to do. It's a really difficult deck to pilot correctly. So I congratulate you on that. It was a really good match.
Oh yeah, thanks. And I can only second the idea of uh, these extremes of winning and losing. When you are missing your land drops in the early game, you're completely screwed and you're just getting completely rolled over. And when things are going your way, it's very soul crushing for the opponent because he's just attacking and there's one fog after the other, and he plays a spell which would kind of matter, and you counter it, and he doesn't see a single way to attack you. But yeah, it takes a lot of effort, and it's not that easy to find out all these plays which are the perfect plays. And I actually lost. I played a daily last week, and I played round one against Tortured Existence and round two against Stompy, and I went 0-2 in the daily, and it was due to misplays mostly, I would say. So you can see, despite me playing this deck for a very long time, and maybe being one of the only people actually who've been playing this version of the deck, at least the banned version of this deck, for so long, it's it's still very tough to find the right place.
For sure. I mean, I've done a few daily rewatches. And it's always interesting to see. You can see with some of the people that are newer to, usually the Simic version of the deck is more popular. And with that deck, if you see somebody who's been playing it for, a long time, and there's one or two players that have been playing the Simic version for a very long time in the dailies, you can see when watching the replay, they're going off, and, they're going off in what seems like perfection. They're able to have fog spell after fog spell, and a lot of time when a new player, I shouldn't say a new player, but somebody who's newer to the deck comes in and you rewatch those games, things just do not seem to go as well for them. So I think this is definitely a deck that gains, a ton of value from being able to pilot it correctly. And it's definitely not a deck that's easy to pilot super correctly, especially with mulligan decisions and sideboarding decisions that definitely aren't as obvious as some other decks.
Yeah, this deck, it is very reliant on you knowing the deck and having experience in playing the deck, for one. And the other thing is that you know the opponent's deck and know how to play against the opponent's deck. If you don't know which spells to counter, if you don't know how much mana you have to keep open when you have to start fogging, how low you can go with your life, you're gonna have a hard time. And that's why I always say, when I play against a deck which I haven't played against in a very long time, that I'm probably gonna lose due to inexperience. But if I played 10 times against the deck, I would probably be favored. Experience plays a huge role.
Yeah, definitely for a deck like this, which is much more skill intensive and matchup dependent, I can see how that'd be the case. But overall, I really do like this list, and I'm hoping to see at least a few more people pick it up and start to play it to success in the dailies. It's always nice to see the deck get there. Actually, just a few times this week, the Simic version of the deck has gotten to the winner's circle, which is really nice. I think it's a much stronger deck than it gets credit for, and it could really be a lot more dominant if a lot of more people were playing it.
Well, since we have the expert here on the metagame thing, maybe we can ask you a couple questions, or I can ask you a couple questions about what you think there. So, I think the obvious reason why this deck always kind of was a little bit hated on by a huge part of the community is you have two camps. You have one camp which is playing creature-based aggro, and absolutely hates this deck because for them playing against this is a nightmare, and the other camp is playing Delver, and for them this is just a buy. So you have people who think this deck is garbage, and you have people who think this deck is just really annoying. And Delver for a very long time, I think for more than a year or 2 years even, was the most played deck all the time. At least that's how I perceive the meta. I didn't really read as many articles, and there wasn't really as much information out there as there is now. But recently, like, oh, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months ago, Delver was pushed away from the top most played deck list, mostly by, I believe, white tokens, and to some degree maybe Stompy. And then after that, Mono Black Control became popular, which kind of makes sense because Mono Black Control is very good against white tokens, I believe, with Crypt Rats. And then Burn became popular, so you see Burn is very good against Mono Black Control, so you have a rock, paper, scissors cyclical thing going. The top deck never stays the top deck, it always gets removed by the next best thing, which is very good against that top deck. And then now Burn obviously is getting pushed out of the meta right now, or not pushed out of the meta, but pushed from the throne, you could say.
Yeah.
And one of the decks which has been making a resurgence is Delver, because Delver is really good against Burn. You can Spellstutter Sprite, Snap, Spellstutter Sprite, very, very good. So the real question here is, what do you expect, or maybe you can talk a little bit how you view the metagame right now and what you expect of the metagame in the future, and just any other thoughts you have maybe on the metagame.
Well, I do think it's interesting because Delver is one of the more peculiar cases in the past meta, because what we saw is once the banning of Treasure Cruise happened, Delver instantly dropped off. And I thought that was really interesting. A lot of people dropped off and stopped playing the Delver list after Treasure Cruise was banned. And I think part of that was due to people thinking that Treasure Cruise was either important to Delver, or that Delver was simply the best deck, so they had to be playing it. But also, there was definitely a certain amount of people that were playing Delver that once Treasure Cruise was banned, they ended up actually just leaving Pauper. They weren't interested in it anymore. So Delver has consistently been a smaller part of the meta for a long time, which I do think plays really, really well for this deck, as, creature-based decks, mono black control, Goblin's Affinity, and that kind of thing start to rise up a little more. And so what you've seen recently is Burn has come up as a result of mono black control being so popular, and Burn is really a deck that's really hard for mono black control to beat. They don't really have the right sideboard cards to face it down nicely. But in response to Burn, you've seen decks like the Esper Familiar deck, Delver, Stompy, all start to rise up, and also hexproof has started to come up a little bit as well, which is interesting. And so right now, I think you see, as we're looking at the MTG Goldfish page, the Esper Familiar appears to be the most popular deck. And interestingly, this week is the first week where Esper Familiar really had close to anywhere near the popularity as any of the other decks. And with that, it's had, 7, 8, pilots in a, one daily, which is just extremely rare for the deck. And with that, it's also had slightly diminished success, but it's also been one of the best performing decks over the past many weeks. And unless something more comes to hate it out, I think it'll continue to be that way. In response to that, I think Delver and Stompy are both also a little bit underplayed to what they could be. Delver does see more success in the dailies that Tom Scud and I don't track. It sees more success in those other dailies, which I think is interesting. And, all throughout that, I would expect as Burn starts to decline more and more and more, I would expect to see mono and black control start to jump up a little bit, and also other decks that are really bad to burn really start to jump up. But I think the biggest story is the Esper Familiars deck and seeing whether that deck is going to be able to maintain success with so many players that are new to the deck actually playing the deck competitively.
Well, that's a lot of interesting thoughts, definitely. Yeah. One thing I just want to say is that what we see here, whenever we see a metagame breakdown or data like this, we have to, you know, we have to actually think about what is this data we're looking at. Is this a snapshot of what's happening right now? Well, no, it isn't. I mean, if you know how this works, they record all the dailies um, which are made public, but the sample size isn't that great because Wizards doesn't release all the dailies, and even if they did, the sample size still wouldn't be that great because they only release like people who go 4-0 and 3-1. So it's kind of tough, and because of this, MTG Goldfish, what they do is like if you win a daily, then you are part of this metagame calculation for like I think 2 or 3 weeks, and so this is always all the dailies for the last 2 or 3 weeks. So part of this is definitely outdated. Part of this could already be obsolete. Like maybe familiar might already be a dead archetype. I mean, we know it's not, but it could very well be that familiar was just really, really popular like 2 weeks ago and now it's dead. But we have to keep this in mind because, for instance, I think Burn is probably the way it looks here is we have 4 decks which are all played the same amount, around 10%. And I think this is definitely wrong. This is a delayed effect. Burn is probably way less than 10%, and Delver, Stompy, Familiar are probably way more than 10%. Well, not way more, but more.
Yeah, I mean, I think with familiar, I mean, if you look at the whole breakdown, everybody goes, 0 and 2 up to the people that go 4 out. Familiar is definitely not up to that 10% level, and for the most part, usually Stompy and Delver aren't either. And with that comes a little bit bias from the Wizards data. Wizards releases 6 dailies per week out of the 9 that actually happen. So you get about a 6% reported deck rate. And with that, there's generally somewhere between 125 to 150 lists, if I'm remembering that correctly. Not 100% sure on that fact. And the stuff you're saying about the information you're looking at is very true, and that's why I think this can be relatively deceiving, especially for new players. Because my theory is a lot of people when they come into Pauper, and I was the same way. They go on MTG Goldfish and they believe, okay, well, familiar, it's the best deck, along with Stompy, Delver, Burn. Those are the biggest portion of the meta. So those are obviously the best decks right now. And because of that, I think that data can be really misleading. And obviously, not all these decks are going to be the best all of the time. And I think the Pauper metagame actually shifts a lot more than people will give it credit for,
Yeah.
especially people that haven't played Pauper. Burn is a deck that you wouldn't have seen in the top 10 just a few weeks ago. And chances are you won't see it in the top 10 in a few weeks, as it continuously gets hated out more and more. So I definitely think the metagame is very fluid, and I think it's a really interesting topic to keep on top of and see what the fluctuations in it are.
So there's 2 things I want to talk about in response to this. So there's you talked about the metagame shifting, the metagame changing, and as I said before, cyclical changes. So you have a deck which is played very much, and I'm gonna take this Mono Black Control example because after Treasure Cruise ban, Mono Black Control is just the most played deck for like maybe a month, and then Burn came the most played deck, as I said before, because Burn is very good against Mono Black Control. It was just the natural. If this was like a free market situation, we would say it's the free market regulating itself. You can kind of make the same argument. It's the meta game regulating itself. More people are playing Burn are more successful. More people are playing Burn. Or people who are playing Burn are playing more dailies and being more successful. And the Burn players, because of that, decreasing or winning less. So we have these cyclical changes, which are, in my opinion, a sign of a good metagame, of a good format, of a well designed format, I would say, which is something we also see in Modern right now, by the way. But I don't want to go too far into that. But I think if you have a format where for like long periods of time the same deck is the most played deck, and it stays that way, and that's usually a sign that something is wrong with the format. That you have to print something or ban something or unban something to shake things up. And it's really nice to see that we don't have this in Pauper anymore. I remember a time when this wasn't the case. I remember a time when Is It Cloudpost. When I started out, I think Is It Cloudpost was the best deck for like forever.
Yeah. I actually came in just a little bit after the Is It Cloud Post banning, and I know that even after that, Delver has remained atop the leaderboard for, forever. And it's really nice we're seeing, especially nowadays, you're seeing a lot more of that cyclical nature of Pauper. And hopefully greater information allows people to, make those dex changes, because I think one of the best things about Pauper just in general is that you're able to switch between lists. And that's something that you're not able to do in a lot of other formats. And hopefully, if that happens, the metagame's going to be able to be more fluid because people are able to switch decks more often as they feel a deck, has gone, out of style or, it's not doing as well.
Yeah. Well, the other thing really, since you're talking about switching lists, is when we're talking about how good is a metagame, how good is a format, diversity is another issue. Like, before the Cloudburst thing became a thing, there were like 3 decks. There was Infect with Invigorate, which was banned, I believe. There was oh, hang on. There was Storm, I believe. And there was one more deck where I think the other deck was Cloudburst. There was only these 3 decks which were really playable, and all there was like tier 2 decks, but they didn't really have a chance. And if we look now, I mean, this week the metagame looks a little bit degenerate actually. But if you had a look like a couple weeks ago, like the most played deck maybe was at 15%, then the second played deck at 10%, and then suddenly the next deck would be like 6%, and you would very soon, if you go down this list, you would reach a point like this where you have 20 decks which are all at 5%. As you can see, this goes down. There's not a huge drop right away. And in many other formats, there's like 4 or 5 decks which are all around 10%, and then there's like 10 um, or like 20 fringe strategies which are around 3 or 4%. But here we just have 20 decks which are almost all around 5%, and you have like the flavor of the month lately decks which are a little bit higher, which are maybe played twice as much. But this is still a very diverse format, and both in terms of colors and in terms of strategies, and it's just a great time to play Pauper.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think something that's interesting is over the past few weeks, decks that have not been the top decks, they haven't made up the largest portion of the dailies, have actually been doing better than those top decks. And I think that's a sign of a healthy metagame and also a sign of a metagame that's ready to be able to shift and ready for new brews and decks that aren't close to as popular, like the BantFog list, to rise up and actually become, something that's a lot more popular, that's known more, and something like this, the Simic Fog list. It's a deck that has been, on the rise, and you're going to see it potentially have more results as more people start to realize that, this is a real deck.
Well, yeah, I think also that most lists you see in this archetype aren't very good. I think I shouldn't say this on the stream, because you never go on the stream and you be a jerk, because you're gonna uh you're gonna alienate, is that the word, your audience?
Alienate is the word, yeah.
Okay. But I'm gonna go out and say here that I don't really like the list that Resident Zombie is the first person who played this. Um, let's see if this is the correct list. So in the same time I won my daily, he won his daily, I think, the very same daily, 3-1. Um, let's see the list here. There it is, once it's loading. Okay, the thing just froze. So here's the no, never mind. Here's the list he's playing. No, that's my list. Hang on.
It's down there.
You know what? Oh, we're just here. I was gonna use the search function now, but we're here. Okay, this is the list he played, and obviously he was successful. He went 3-1. I went 3-1 with my list. And I had a look at this list, and I mean, the results speak for him. He's been successful in the past and also now again. But if I look at this list, there's a certain amount of cards which I think are unplayable, or at least not optimal, suboptimal. And that's another sign that this deck is not taken so seriously, because if it was taken seriously, certain people who are very good at deck building, like Opson for instance, would just take this deck, try to abuse it, optimize it to the maximum, and crash and cash out in the dailies with this. And you haven't seen this. You haven't seen like 10 people taking up this deck because it's so good, optimizing it, and just grinding dailies with it. Um, so definitely doesn't have the respect like some other deck lists have. Like if you, there's a lot of people who just jumped on the mono black control, jumped on the burn train just because it was popular, and built their own optimized lists and tried to grind dailies with it.
Yeah. I'm interested to hear what cards in this list or what choices do you think that could be improved to be made a better list?
Well, let's go through this. Deep Analysis is a 4-mana sorcery. I think that's everything that has to be said about this card. Well, let's be fair here. This is a great draw engine. This is gonna draw you 4 cards at the cost of 1 card. So you're up 3 cards as card advantage, but really 4-mana sorcery. 4 mana is so expensive. If this is in your starting hand, it's a dead card, and
Hmm.
you never want to tap out 4 mana in your main. I mean, you need at least 2 mana for a fog, at least 2 mana to have a counter open. So this is dead before 8 mana. So 4 mana sorcery. That's all I have to say about this card. You see 4 Preordain. Preordain itself is a good card, but you don't want to play too many 1 mana cantrips, I call them, or filter spells. I don't call them draw spells, I call them kind of filter spells. They help you find your land drops, they help you find a fog when you need one, but they don't generate card advantage. And generating card advantage is a huge part of this deck because you play a fog spell every turn. At some point, at least, you're gonna start doing that. And you're not gonna draw a fog every single turn. You're gonna draw a land sometimes. So your hand size is gonna decrease every other turn. So you need a certain amount of draw spells which are just pure card advantage. So you can't play, in my opinion, 4 Preordain, 4 Brainstorm. I mean, maybe 8 is just around where it's still possible. I play 6 filter spells, he plays 8. I think this is questionable but probably doable. He plays, I mean, his card advantage engine with deep analysis is a little bit stronger. Once deep analysis is online, you're gonna have an easier time um, refilling your hand, as I have with maybe accumulate knowledge. But again, 4 mana sorcery. Really think about this very hard. Then we have a 2 mana sorcery here. This card I used to play as a 4-off, and I think if you compare this card to accumulate knowledge, I just don't know why you would play this card over accumulate knowledge right now, since there is no graveyard hate, virtually none. And really the problem here is sorcery speed again. It's, first of all, this card doesn't generate card advantage. It looks that way, draw 2, but then you have to shuffle a card from your hand into your library. So if you really read this card, it kind of says, I'm a weird kind of brainstorm. Draw 2, shuffle 1 away is it's not really brainstorm, but you get the idea. It's, while you do get to see 2 cards, you only get to keep 1. So in the end, it's kind of a cantrip. And being at sorcery speed means that I don't really like it that much. For Arcanonal, I think is also a questionable thing. Arcanonal is just not very good counterspell. If you think about Arcanonal, well, I'm gonna rescind what I just said. Arcanonal is a very good counterspell, but if you think about Arcanonal, it's not sustainable to cast Arcanonal against just any spell. If you play against Burn, this is a prime example. You play against Burn and the Burn player plays Lightning Bolt. You're never gonna Arcanonal that, because he's gonna draw 2 cards. Chances are he's gonna draw 2 more Lightning Bolts, or like Curse of a Pierce Heart or Kelder Marauders. So you didn't do anything. You didn't even really slow him down, because next turn he's gonna have probably more mana. Maybe he drew a land, and Arcanonal, I try to say this on the stream very often. You only Arcanonal things which you would die to. Things you want to Arcanonal is something like Ulamog's Crusher, or Mnemonic Wall, or a counter war over your Fog, or Corrupt, or Gary. It's things which will actually result in you losing the game. You don't, on turn 2 when your opponent is playing his first creature, you don't think, oh, I could counter here, I could slow down his clock. Well, actually I do think this sometimes, but it's generally the wrong way to approach Arcanonal. You really have to realize that Arcanonal is just a huge draw engine for your opponent, and you only ever counter spell if it really doesn't, if you really can't let it resolve. So, and if you keep that in mind, then the question is, why play 4 of the main? I think 4 of the main is definitely not optimal. So you see, we are at 4 cards in, and I already spoke like half an hour about this deck list. So, but we're gonna go on here. I think the Moment's Peace and the Tangle are good. I think Jace is good. Don't agree with 3 models. I think the transmuting toolkit version of this deck is very important, but I think this is like a really minor issue. I think people have been playing 3 or sometimes even just 2 models for a very long time, and sometimes model is just a dead card in your hand, especially in the early. But then again, you play stuff like Deep Analysis, so well, this card is like the most, I don't know. I don't want to go out and just flame this card too much. So then we have Respite, which I like. And I actually like that he's only playing 10 Fogs. Because most people play 12 Fogs. I used to play 12 Fogs, and I never ran out of Fogs, and then I cut 2 Fogs, and I still don't run out of Fogs. So people who play 12 Fogs, try 10 Fogs. You have more draw spells, you have more counter, you have more whatever you want to add, and it usually works out better. So when we have Pristine Talisman, which I think is a little bit worse than Quietus Repair, but I definitely think this is playable. I don't have a huge issue with this. And then here it comes, Train of Thought. Going with a theme of unplayable, too expensive sorcery spells. So I played this card, I like this card. I think there's not really that many good draw spells in Pauper actually. I mean, there was one. It was 8 mana, but I was able to cast it a lot for 1 mana. But somehow Wizards thought that wasn't fair. So, but except for Treasure Cruise, there really isn't a great, huge draw engine. And at some point I saw Train of Thought and I thought, oh, this is great. It's like Swings of Revelation for Pauper, but really, if you look at it, there's just so many things wrong with it. I mean, the first thing, the glaring thing is sorcery speed. Because this would be so much better if it was instant. I think you would actually be able to play this, because sometimes you're just gonna have 8 mana, and you're gonna Fog for 2, and then you have 6 mana open at the end turn, and then you just replicate and draw 3, and that would be amazing. And, you know, in worst case, you only have 2 mana, and then you use it as a cantrip, and that wouldn't be too bad if you're in a top deck mode. So if this was instant, I think it would be playable. But you're never gonna be in a situation where in your main phase you think, oh, I can just spend 6 mana. And I think 6 mana is what you're gonna spend to make this card worthwhile. At 2 mana it's bad, at 4 mana it's bad. And yeah, you're not gonna spend 6 mana in your main phase. So this card seems just unplayable in this deck to me. I think I would play Compulsive Research over this card, but I would definitely play Keepwatch over Compulsive Research in turn. So this card is just unplayable in my opinion. Random Reclaim, I tried out Reclaim. I didn't like it, he likes it. I don't want to talk about this card too much because I don't have that much experience. So, it's mostly the draw package, I would say. The draw spells which I find suboptimal and which I could, well, which I did really talk a lot about. And also the mana base. I'm not a huge fan of Karoo lands. I hate Karoo lands with a passion. They are very weak against land destruction, Choking Sands, and the Tron lists play the flashback thing, and
Earth Rift?
yeah, there's something else. What else is there? A Thermocast, right?
Thermocast, yeah, it's the one green one.
Yeah, so we have Thermocast, Choking Sands, and Earth Rift being real cards in the format, and additionally I think it's just slow. If your hand is Island, Simic Growth Chamber, and you don't have a 1-drop, you're not going to have a 1-drop or a 2-drop. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I think that especially in this list. I mean, I think the Karoo lands can be really strong in like really slow down control list, like the blue black control list that has been semi popular, and that helps you keep hitting your land drops. But especially in this list, I mean, with the fog list, it's really important to have untapped lands to be able to fog as much as possible, and having to take one of those back on your main phase does not seem to be optimal at all.
Well, yeah, as I said before, I really hate Karoo lands, so I'm biased at this. I realize that, but I think if you play Karoo lands, you want to play Cloud of Fairies, and vice versa. If you play Cloud of Fairies, you want to play Karoo lands maybe. But otherwise, I wouldn't I don't think there's any deck I would play Karoo lands over Fetch, just because I hate Karoo lands. And also, but I mean, there's more to Fetch here. I mean, we play Brainstorm, and Fetchland Brainstorm is, I mean, it's a known thing that Fetchland Brainstorm is pretty good. And also, Fetchlands do thin your deck, and then there's always like somebody in the audience standing up and saying, "Not this argument again. You know, the thinning is so irrelevant." Well, you are wrong for this deck. You're not wrong in general. For most decks, like Modern or whatever, deck thinning is not really that big of an issue, but our games go late. Our games go to turn 10 and more. At the end of our games, we usually have around 20 cards left in our library, and we fetch 3 or 4 times. So if you do the math, and if you look at one of your decks, or at your library at the end of the game, you realize there's maybe like 20 cards left and 2 or 3 lands. Now the expected value of how many lands you would expect on average would be more like 7. So there's 3 or 4 lands missing quite clearly because we fetched 3 or 4 times, which means if we are top decking in the late game, there's a significantly lower chance to draw a blank. I mean, the difference is huge, having 7 lands out of 20 or having 3 lands out of 20. And
Yeah.
yeah, this is actually, I think, like the best example that is in the whole of Magic for how deck thinning can be relevant.
Yeah, I think in your deck especially, I mean, even with, the Brainstorm fetch package, which is just, anything that's legacy playable is generally pretty good. Um, and then also the fact, especially in your list, with the 3 colors, being able to fetch whatever color is needed is extremely helpful.
Yeah, I mean, in the free colored list for sure. In the free colored list, I think you can't argue for playing Karoo lands or like the life gain lands or anything else over fetch lands. But
Hmm.
as I said, the deck thinning and the brainstorm interaction are pretty important, and sometimes even like base shittering rats, and you can mill something away, you don't, or you can shuffle something away. That's important too. So, but I just want to say here, I did go very hard on this deck list. I mean, he has been performing good, or well, and I think this deck list is playable. I don't like these cards. Maybe I'm wrong. It's definitely a possibility, and I don't want to speak out against diversity. I think you should play whatever you feel comfortable playing with. But what I really want to stress here is he did good. He was the first person for a long time to play this blue-green version and do good. And as I said, it's the same daily that I played. And people popped up and they played the same 75. I think the second person to play this replaced one card, and that was Train of Thought. So congrats to him. He realized what was the worst card in the deck, but he kept all the other bad cards. So that's kind of what I don't like. People see this list doing well, they just copy the 75, and they don't think for themselves. And what we're stuck with is 5 people topping the dailies again and again with the exact same 75, which is just, well, garbage is going too far, but it's just not optimal. And that's really annoying me. Why are they not, using their own brain cells, making their own decisions, changing stuff around? I change stuff around in my deck lists almost every week, mainboard and sideboard, just because I'm so curious to see how a certain card is going to perform. And I check these deck lists hoping to see somebody else play another card, and all I see is the same things over and over again, and it's really annoying me.
All right. Well, that's definitely an in-depth review of the Simic fog list.
Well,
Uh,
you asked me to say which cards I didn't like, so I you baited me into that.
well, I definitely think it was interesting. It was definitely insightful for me because I mean, I don't have too much experience with the fog list. So I do think it's interesting how, I mean, this deck has definitely not performed bad, and I know Resident Zombie has done very, very well with the list, which I do think is interesting. And, I do think a lot of your arguments made a lot of sense on, why different cards in the list, they just don't fit with the play style of the deck. So I do think it's interesting. And to that same point, when you say, wish people would stop copying the same 75 more, I think I can agree to that. I mean, Pauper is definitely a format where you see new players are attractive, a hive mind can develop. But anytime a new brew pops up, it's definitely interesting to see that 75 how they're doing it, and increasing the diversity of the format.
Yeah, yeah. I just want to say one more thing. I talked about a lot of the cards which I don't like, which I think are bad. I mean, it's not obvious what is the better choice. It's not obvious which card you can replace deep analysis with, for instance. So that's part of the reason why it is so interesting, why I want to see different people. If it was obvious, if everybody knew, oh well, you just replace deep analysis with accumulate knowledge and the deck is so much better, then I wouldn't need other lists, then I wouldn't need to test myself the cards. But that's kind of a sad thing. Nobody's testing. Everybody's just playing one list and taking it for granted, saying this is the list and we're gonna stick with that. When there's so many other spells which are around the same power level, all of them are kind of shitty, to be honest. I think the draw spells in Pauper, again, rest in peace, Cruz. All the draw spells we have now are kind of shitty. So, but I think accumulate knowledge is currently one of the best, and I think you kind of need to play accumulate knowledge right now, otherwise your list is not optimal. But then maybe they're just playing their decks in a different way. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, with accumulate knowledge specifically, part of that problem probably is the price. I mean, accumulate knowledge is what, $20 for a playset
No.
now?
Oh, for Placeit? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
So
Placeit.
not $20 a card, that not days levels. Um, but especially with all the UB anglerfish that have been popping up recently, seeing a lot more play to accumulate knowledge, which is really probably one of the most underplayed spells in Pauper. The card is fantastic for the amount of play it sees.
Well, the funny thing about accumulate knowledge is it's not really played in any specific deck. If you have a look at it, I own this card, and whenever it spikes, I'm like tempted to sell it because it's like 3 dailies worth of uh, money I would make. If I sold
Yeah.
this, I could play 3 more dailies. And if we look at the recent decks using accumulate knowledge, well, it's in BantFog, kind of because of me, because I'm the one who played, the only person really who played BantFog in a daily. I won, and then a couple people copied my list completely. It's in blue-green. Um, this wasn't there like a week ago. Just now, people, like one person I think, took a blue-green list and replaced the deep analysis with accumulate knowledge, which I really find a great idea.
Hmm.
And other than that, it's only played in Angler, so it's not really played in a really popular deck. It's not really played much. Still, it's expensive, and the supply is low. So whenever and the price of accumulate knowledge is very inconsistent. It keeps dropping off to 1 ticket for like a month because like a deck like Angler didn't play it or just didn't exist maybe like half a year ago, and then accumulate knowledge was only worth a ticket, and suddenly a deck like Angler pops up. It gets a little bit of hype. A lot of people buy it, and suddenly it's up to 5 tickets. So this is kind
Yeah.
of annoying because I mean you just wrote the article about the price thing, and you omitted a card like accumulate knowledge, which I think is okay because it's not played that much, and a card like Days, which is also okay because it's also not played that much. But it's kind of sad that there's still some of these cards which could be staples in the format, but probably are kept away from that impact because of their price.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, with me personally, I think a lot of it comes down to those sideboard cards that, I mean, they're good sideboard cards, but, a lot of people don't need them to be competitive, mainly about Gorilla Shaman, Hydroblast, Pyroblast, all those things. And I mean, a lot of those are 5 tickets or more at this point. And, you don't need them to be competitive in Pauper, but most of the time they're just the best card that's available for the sideboard. And it's always sad when you see people that are being a little pushed away from the format, or they're not playing an optimal list because of one sideboard card that's really expensive.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's certainly a problem. And I think with accumulate knowledge, they could have just fixed this because this was in a dual deck. I think Elspeth versus the Simic Merfolk.
Sure.
Yeah, that girl or guy. I don't know. I think it's a girl. Anyway, uh, or female anything. Anyway, they could have just released that online, but I don't know what their policy is with dual decks online. I think there's some dual decks online, but sadly that dual deck didn't make it online, and this card was included in that dual deck. I think as a two of, funnily enough. I I,
I think
I
it's,
don't
I
I
think it
don't.
was a 4 of actually.
It was a four of? Okay,
I'm pretty sure.
because playing this card as a two of, that's some interesting deck building skills.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I think we talked about the whole things here long enough. It was a very fun talk. I think a lot of interesting things we talked about. So kind of coming to a close, is there anything else maybe you want to say before we end the video?
No, I think that's it. It was really interesting getting your insight into the fog lists as, the Pauper's resident expert on those fog lists. And really interesting to see how that deck played out, and really how strong the deck can be.
Yeah. So maybe just as an on an ending note here, just one two questions now about what you expect. Well, first of all, what do you have planned for the future here at the MagicGatheringStrat channel? Of course, you just released the article about the price. Do you maybe think about maybe creating some video content of your own, or maybe just writing articles, or what do you think?
Well, I've been working on the articles and I'm going through restructuring of those, trying to make them better and less wordy and a lot more concise and maybe a little bit easier to read. And after that, did get all the recording software set up, so I might try my hand at starting to record some matches and get some insight into some new decks.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. Okay, well, I want to thank you for coming online with me and doing this. Um, I want to thank everybody who's stuck to the end and watched this video. I know you guys liked the review of the Modern Daily, and really wanted to do another review. There's not gonna be that many reviews, so you have to enjoy these because they're a lot of work. I have to do editing. I have to get somebody to talk to me. It takes several hours more than just playing and uploading right away, so it's a lot of effort. But I do enjoy doing this, and stay tuned for more of these reviews of different formats. And please tell me in the comments, uh, what you think we could do better. I know production value isn't that high. I'm still getting used to a couple things, and which format or which deck you want the next review. Should I do a Pauper daily review, or maybe um, which guest I should have next on? Just let me know in the comments. I really appreciate your feedback. And once again, thanks for najay1, our guest today, and I'll see you guys next time.